Morning, everyone. Hey, Jinendra. I, Oshin Bamb, on behalf of Ancient Jainism, welcome you all. Let us start this particular conversation with the Manglacharan. Namo Arihantanam, Namo Siddhanam, Namo Ayaryanam, Namo Vajjayanam, Namo Loe Savva Sahunam. Eso Panchanamukkaro, Savva Pavapanasano, Manglanam cha Savvesim, Padamam Havai Mangala. Today, we have with us Professor Emeritus Dr. Hampa Nagarjaiah, sir, popularly known as Hampana, and his specific title, Nadoja, has been given to him on his contributions of Jain studies, on his contribution of being a wonderful teacher. He has written multiple books, edited multiple volumes, contributed several scholarly articles. In fact, he is a scholar on whom multiple scholars have written felicitation volumes that tells us about the depth of knowledge that Professor Hampa Nagarjaiah sir has on the topic of Jain studies. It is our immense pleasure that we have with us such a scholarly person, an experienced person in the field of Jain studies and Kannada studies, to talk with us to inspire our viewers on the topic of further endeavors into Jain studies. We are very fortunate to have you, sir, with us on the platform of Ancient Jainism. With a warm welcome, I would like to ask you our first question on behalf of all the viewers that we have at Ancient Jainism. So let us take a little bit backside of the timeline and let me ask you, can you take us back to your early years when you were just beginning your studies in Jain studies? What was that particular turning point that actually brought you into forefront and that made you interested in the domain of studies in Kannada literature and Jain studies? Can you please elaborate upon that, sir?
Yes, Jai Janendra. Well, I was born in a Digambara Jaina family. I should make it clear in the beginning itself. I was born at a very small village called Hampasandra. It is in the Gauribidanur taluk of Chikballapur district in Karnataka. Well, my parents very devoted and devotional. Uh, and then, astonishingly, it so happened, though I come from a bilingual area where both Telugu and Kannada are spoken. Even today, when I go to my village, our conversation starts in Telugu, though my mother tongue is Kannada. Because people there are very equal, facile, very easy with both Telugu and Kannada. But my parents, apart from my parents, my forefathers, I will start from my early grandfather. Astonishingly, a palm leaf was discovered in Bangalore University manuscript compartment that my forefather, maybe some 300 years ago, had written on palm leaf manuscript. He had copied the Jaina text. That means in our family tradition, and a liking and respect and devotion to Jainism was there, and my parents also continued it. So I was born in that atmosphere. And then my father, Padmanabhaya, was a village accountant, you see, and then who had studied in Mysore in the early 1920s. And he was a scholar in Kannada, adept in Sanskrit, and adroit in Telugu. And he used to very frequently tell me, dear son, one should love his mother tongue, but should not hate other languages.
Hmm,
That
very
was the
true.
first lesson that my father taught me. And then my mother, Padmavatamma, my mother, very, she was a nugget of wisdom, uneducated, but she was good in singing devotional songs, the mantras. When we had a small Jaina shrine within our house, and then early in the morning after taking bath and all that, my parents used to go and sit there, and my father and mother together, and also children sitting on either flanking my parents. We all used to do the bhajan and all that, and do the prayer and observe the rituals. And then my parents also used to take me whenever they used to visit the temples or go on yatra, Shikarji and all that. My parents used to ask us to accompany them when it is not any disturbance for they were attending the classes and all that we used to follow on. Now, what I mean to say is that my childhood, I had the impact of my parents who had soaked in the principles and practice of Jainism.
Wonderful, sir.
Well,
Wonderful.
those were the days when none in the family would take food after sunset.
Oh,
Before sunset, yes. Obviously, I imbibed the scholarship of my learned father and Jaina way of life from my mother. My father had maintained a small library containing some printed books, uh, for which I had very easy access, and which created a taste for reading, and gradually it blossomed. After I stepped into the portals of university, it was metamorphosis, because the epics and Puranas would have meant little to me if its ambassadors were not among the most brilliant and admirable scholars in the literary field. Thus, my journey started with many subjects, with Jainism at the center, and continues to allure. This is a brief description of my childhood.
absolutely, sir. Your journey has been very much inspiring, and it should be made highlighted that how a scholar owes everything to his fathers and the senior scholars who have worked before him. That's very much wonderful, sir. Bringing this question further, you said that you have visited the Jain pilgrimage centers like Shikharji and the other centers. So, what contrast did you see in the actual archaeology of the region and the pilgrimage part of that particular site? This is just a question from my side.
Right. Let me recollect the famous statement of my wife, my learned wife, Kamala Hampana, who unfortunately passed away recently, 11 months back. She used to very frequently tell me, um, one who is busy discharging 10 works can also attend to the 11th one. He who does not do anything cannot do anything. But he who is active continue to be active and attend to so many works. From my childhood, I was very mischievous, even now. But but at the same time, very curious to attend to a variety of works, because curiosity pushed me into the study of subjects of allied disciplines. As a student of BA Honors and MA PG classes, I had the rare opportunity of studying cultural history, poetics, linguistics, epigraphy, folklore, Sanskrit, and Tamil, in addition to Kannada literature. That was the great advantage, very great advantage for me in my college days. I studied in the Maharaja's College, Mysore University. Well, thus I was very familiar with many subjects, and evinced a keen interest in all those subjects to develop the basic infrastructure. Since I was exposed to classical literature at an early age during the period of higher studies, and later I grew in its comprehension through my own maturity and experience of the cycle of time. My dedicated study of almost all printed Jaina works, mainly classics and mostly in Kannada and Sanskrit, and a few major works in Prakrit and Apabhramsha, inspired me to write about the unique contribution of Jains and the importance of their vast literature, art, and architecture. I have been writing for over 70 years of various aspects and topics of Jaina lore. In the beginning, for nearly 50 years, I wrote in Kannada only, my mother tongue. From the year 2000 onwards, I started writing in English. Consistently, I wrote many books in English also. My book, Morphology of Jaina Architecture, narrates in detail and in depth the nature and contribution of Jaina art and architecture in Karnataka, where almost every nook and corner of Karnataka has Jaina temples even today, though
Yes.
many of them are destroyed. It happens, you see, when the fanatics start attacking. They did attack. And I will come to that point later. Yeah. Mm.
Yes. Thank you so much, sir, for narrating us your journey into academics and how you have contributed to the field of academics for over 70 years. But I would also like to ask you, sir, over the journey of these 70 years that your academic journey has covered, you have published more than 60 books, you have written more than 200, 300 articles, not just in Kannada, but also in English and so many other languages. And your specific poem has been translated into more than 15 languages. That's a very big achievement, sir. How do you see the field of Kannada and Jain studies evolve over a period of time? Like since the beginning of your academic journey until today, how has the journey of the academic research in Kannada and Jainism made its progress?
Yes, it is true that my academic journey it spans over a period of more than 6 decades. But I was soaked in the pool of knowledge in which great saints, scholars, and writers they were swimming in the pond of knowledge. And the more I studied, the more I learned that the land of Kannada language, literature, and cultural history is very fertile. The Kannada literary world is not only vast and varied, but also is great in scale and metamorphic tropes. The role of Jaina writers was prominent, and their contribution was outstanding, simply outstanding. Hence, I decided to study and explore the depth and dimension of their commitment to Kannada land and literature. Jaina writers were the earliest to adopt Kannada language for writing commentaries on Shatkandagama, and Tattvartha Sutra, etc. The basic Agama and Shastra Granthas were in Prakrit and Sanskrit, sensing the need for translating them into the language of the place. Jaina men of letters quickly swung into action and started rendering the standard tikas on the Tattvartha Sutra of Umaswati and other canonical texts. Interestingly, the senior monks took initiative and inspired others to take up the cause of both translating and writing independent commentaries in local language. Subsequently, Jaina writers started to author literary works, and a series of classics and epics and Jaina Puranas written by illustrious poets enriched the glory of Kannada literature. Jainism flourished as a state language, and Jaina poets adored the king's darbar court and were honored as court poets. Jaina writers freely borrowed the theme and different varieties of meters from Prakrit and Sanskrit, which enriched Kannada language and literature. Poets, Ponna, Ranna, and Janna were honored by their kings who bestowed the title of Kavichakravarti. Kings bestowed these title on major poets and uh, Pampa, the greatest of Kannada poets, who stands shoulder to shoulder with the world's greatest poets, wrote the Adi Purana and the Vikramarjana Vijayam, also popular as the Pampa Bharatam, two immortal epics that Pampa, as I said, he is not only very important poet in the context of Kannada, in the context of all Indian languages, he was the first to render the Vyasa Bharata into local language, into the languages of the people, the earliest in India. Well, he inspired a retinue of gifted and brilliant poets like Nagachandra, Shantinatha, and Nagavarma, a host of writers. Uh, they were all celebrated authors who scripted excellent Jaina Puranas in Kannada. Thus, Kannada literature was flooded with biographies of Trishashti Shalaka Purushas. Sri Vijaya, one of the earliest poets in Kannada literature. He was a friend, philosopher, and guide of Amoghoshan Nrupatunga, the greatest emperor of the imperial dynasty, Rashtrakutas. Yeah. And then this the Mallikarjuna, also another writer, he composed the Sukti Sudharanama, the first anthology of verses taken from ancient classics. And his son, Keshiraja, wrote the Shabdamani Darpana, the best of Kannada grammars. Thus, Jaina authors inundated Kannada literature with extraordinary works and opened a new horizon to inspire a generation of talented writers. So, Kannada literature is full of Jaina literature, full of Jaina authors, and it is also usually said that Kannada literature minus Jaina work is zero. So, that's the amount of contribution, maybe exaggeration, but there is a lot of truth in it.
Thank you very much, sir, for elaborating on the contribution of the Jain writers to the language of the land of Karnataka, and also for taking us through the brief biographies and the autobiographical and the other works and the commentaries of the Jain writers over a period of time. My next question to you, sir, is that you've been awarded so many prestigious awards. You have won the Sahitya Akademi Award, the Jain Jewel Award, and there are so many others. You've worked a lot in this particular field. What can be the urgent priority, as per you, for the future scholars of Jain studies in the Indian subcontinent? Are there any unexplored areas which the future scholars of Jain studies should pay their attention to?
Yeah. Uh, there is so much scope for further research, despite being, say, a lot of work has been done by so many other scholars, not only Ampana, many other scholars have done human service to Kannada literature. And in spite of all that, there is a lot of scope for further research. But competent and qualified scholars are limited. It's unfortunately the zeal for going into the deeper study of our ancient works, that taste is not there, that urge is not there, because the modern writers, they are towards the digital study and all that. Naturally, I appreciate all that, but we should also try to, our responsibility being born in the Jaina community, it is there. We should do something to protect our ancestors' knowledge that has been passed on to us. Therefore, hello, shall I
Yes,
go on?
yes, yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes, sir,
yeah.
yes.
Uh, Highest number of Jaina inscriptions, for that matter, come from Karnataka. The two greatest Apabhramsha Mahakavis, that is Swayambhu Deva and Pushpadanta, they lived and wrote their epics in Karnataka. And scholars have prepared an infrastructure for a comparative critical study of their works, and there is scope for further study to examine their influence on other poets and vice versa. For example, Bhujabala Shastri ji, who is no more, but had prepared a catalogue of an exhaustive catalogue of Jaina palm leaf
Hmm.
manuscripts preserved in the Bandaras of Moodbidri in South Canara. And the title was Tadapatri Grantha Suchi. It was in Devanagari script. He had prepared it, and it was published some 60 years ago by Bharati Jnanpith. They had published it. It is very, very valuable, and because it is studied with important information about hundreds of early Jaina works, and some of them remain unpublished even today. So there is scope for further research on that particular, based on that particular catalog prepared by Bhujabal Shastri. And then Kannada has borrowed thousands of Prakrit words in its early stages and are harmoniously assimilated into the body of Kannada literature. Many of the words considered as borrowing from Sanskrit are actually borrowed via Prakrit. The words from Prakrit in Kannada have undergone phonetic, morphological, and semantic changes. How far our ancient grammarians and the lexicons have noticed and dealt with is not studied and needs to be researched intensively and extensively from various angles. A good number of Kannada commentaries on Prakrit works of Kundakunda and others avoid detailed discussion even today. Prakrit influence on early Kannada works like Vadaradhane and the poems of Nevi Chandra and Ratnakar Varni requires a comparative study. Number three, translation of Shvetambara Agamas into Kannada demands an immediate attention because that will facilitate an objective study of basic principles of Digambara and Shvetambara. Number four, another area to be explored on priority is the so far published Jaina inscriptions. The
Hmm.
Kannada
Yes.
University Hampi has published in almost all extant Jaina inscriptions collection anthology has published almost all extant Jaina inscriptions in Karnataka in 5 volumes with Hindi translation and also a volume in English containing only the summary. I was the chief director for that, and
Wow. Wonderful, sir.
yeah, Hampi University has really done excellent work because there is a Jaina chair also, which I inaugurated, launched that Jaina chair there, and they have been conducting seminar and all other well works of interest for the youth to take up for further work. So these are some of the areas where there is scope for further research, and our youngsters should go out and out to take up these works. And then there is another important area. It is important to know how Prakrit language and literature has perforated into Kannada language and literature and even culture. Shall I go on?
Yes, sir. Yes, yes.
Yeah. It is important to know how Prakrit language and literature has perforated into Kannada language, literature, and culture. The previous Paramapujya Bhattarakji of Shravanabellagola, he helped to protect and promote Prakrit legacy. He built a huge Prakrit Bhavan where certificate and diploma classes in Prakrit are conducted even today. So far, more than 15,000 candidates have attended the Prakrit classes,
Hmm.
and the certificates were distributed to the successful candidates in the annual convocation. To popularize the Prakrita glory globally, Pujya Bhattarakji instituted the Prakrit Jnanabharati International Puraskar, a prestigious award which also carries a cash prize of 3 lakh rupees. Therefore, it is the need of the hour to protect Prakrit Parampara. Yes.
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely. In fact, the Bhattarakas and their contributions in the medieval period have also been very much immense. Taking this further, sir, you have written multiple articles, but one of these articles is titled as Jainism and Kannada Literary Aesthetics, where you have specifically argued for a Jain contribution to Rasadhvani. Could you please elaborate on how Jain poets negotiated between aesthetic values and literary expression?
Well, students of literature are familiar with the nine rasas,
Yes.
Shungara, Hasya, Karuna, Raudra, Veera, Bhayanaka, Bibhatsa, Duta, Shanti, etc. But it is curious to know that Bharata Muni, in his Natya Shastra, one of the earliest books on the subject, you see,
Yes.
where he has mentioned only 8 rasas.
Hmm.
And the shloka, it runs like this. Shungara Hasya Karuna Raudra Veera Bhayanakaha Bibat Sadhuta Chet Ashtau Natye Rasaha Smrutaha. Then how did the ninth rasa, the Shanta rasa, enter into the list? It's very important. But after long debate, scholars have come to the conclusion after a thorough study that Shantarasa is the contribution of Jainism. Expert scholars found that one of the ancient Jaina texts has a reference to Shantarasa. And most importantly, the quintessence of all Jaina Puranas is Shanta. Jaina poets in Prakrit, Apabhramsha, Sanskrit, and Kannada language and other local languages have suitably and meaningfully fused the aesthetic ideals in their poetry of Jainism. They have cleverly employed beautiful narratives as a powerful media for communicating ascetic life and ideals. Worship of uh, Jina Shasanas, Devatas, and then Bahubali. These are the area which has become very popular. Recently, Mrs. Anita Surendra Kumar of Dharmasthala took the lead in spreading and popularizing Jina Bhajanas. Jina Bhajanas. It is become recently very popular, and the credit goes to Anita, in which young and old have participated in thousands. Well, there is scope for on the similar lines to inspire the youngsters, and they have come. You see, youngsters, they are just waiting for the elders to guide them and lead them.
Yes, wonderful, sir. In fact, I think the conversations with scholars like you would definitely guide us more towards the correct direction.
Thank you.
Sir, your work highlights Jain influences on the genres of Vachana, Champu, Tripadi. How did the Jain values subtly persist even in the later Bhakti-dominated literary periods?
Uh, Kannada literature has witnessed several changes in its long journey. Its first phase was mainly confined to tikas, commentaries. Kannada literature, in the beginning stage, we find the commentaries. And most of the known early commentaries up to the 8th century, far earlier to Ramanujacharya and Madhvacharya, are of Jaina affiliation. The second phase witnessed the arrival of creative writers in prose and poetry. Again, Jaina works and writers dominated with their path-breaking classics, embracing both Jaina and non-Jaina themes. Jaina poets enjoyed royal patronage. The Banavasi Kadambas were Shaivas, but extended full support to all the sects of Jainism. Their Magna Carta, the royal charter of the Banavasi Kadambas, they were Shaivas, as I said. It runs like this. Yasmin Jinendra Puja Pravartate Tatra Tatra Desha Parivruddhihi Nagaranam Nirbhayata Taddesha Swamina Chorja. Wherever the Jina is worshipped, that country progresses. And people can walk even in the midnight, without any fear. How did this happen? Because of the influence of Jainism. That was the thinking of the Banavasi Kadamba kings and queens. For that matter, the first earliest Jaina temples and temples dedicated to goddess Padmavati were built by Kadamba kings. That was in 5th, 6th, 7th century, 1400 years ago. Karnataka is known for many valiant Jaina Dandanayakas, Senapatis. Shrutakirti, the earliest known Jaina Senapati, saved the life of Kakustavarma, that is king of Manamasi Kadambas, in 6th century. Successive royal dynasties, the Gangas, the Chalukyas, Badami and Kalyana Chalukyas, Rashtrakutas, Hoysalas, Vijayanagara kings, and a number of minor dynasties, they extended full support to Jaina monks and nuns and writers. But the journey was not always a bed of roses. Tamil Nadu had witnessed attacks on Jains from Shaivas in the 9th century. Similarly, Karnataka also had to suffer the cruel attacks of militants under the leadership of Adaya, Goggarasa, Viruparsa, and others in the 12th and 13th century. Jaina houses were burned and looted. Jaina monks were tortured and butchered. Women and nuns were disrobed and molested, and Jinamandiras were converted into Shiva Mandiras. Lakhs of Jains were converted by force into Shaivism. But Jains, instead of retaliating, slowly regained their confidence, built new temples, and faced the situation calmly but boldly. Writers shifted from Champu form of uh, literature to Shatpadi and Sangatya varieties without losing the soul and sap of Jaina principles of devotion to Deva, Guru, and Shastra. Well, difficulties come, but we have to overcome. We should not lose confidence, and Jains stood the test of time, and they were successful.
Yes,
It's very
I
painful to
think
hear,
that's
I
what
know.
the mastery of history is. Yes, yes. But I think that we should definitely learn from history and we should learn from our ancestors who have stood by the notions of non-violence, satya, ahimsa, asteya, aparigraha, and brahmacharya, and the ideals that our ascetics and our monks and nuns have stood for so many years of time. My next question to you, sir, is that your essays on Jain saints like Mahakavi Pampa and Gunabhadra
Yeah. Uh, Jaina
built
poets,
deep textual studies. How do you blend history?
Yeah, I will come back to that point. Jaina poets did not stay in ivory towers. They responded to the needs of the hour. They rose
Yes,
to the
yes.
occasion and faced the situation. Not only they faced the situation, they encouraged others also to take up and face boldly. So that's
Mm-hmm.
how they rose to the occasion. Throughout centuries of Jaina history, Jaina genius moved with the spirit of times and responded favorably. If you look at the unbroken legacy of Jainism, Karnataka was the cradle of Jainism. It is amazing that they have contributed in every branch of knowledge and left their imprints. Curiously, Jains were pioneers to adopt the languages of place wherever they settled. In Kannada literature, Jains were the protagonists. Pampa was the Adikavi. And
Hmm.
yes, he was the pater familias of Kannada literature. As a rare coincidence, his younger brother, Jinavallabha, Pampa's younger brother, Jinavallabha, has the unique distinction of being the Adikavi, first poet of Telugu literature. Pampa was
Oh,
Adikavi of Kannada language. In the neighboring
Kannada
state,
literature.
Andhra, where Telugu was the language, Pampa's brother Jinavallabha, he became the Adikavi. He was the first poet to write a great inscription in three languages. Well,
Wonderful.
this is the only instance in literature where brothers are the primal poets of two different but neighboring languages and states. Added to this, the Jaina glory, another Jaina poet, Ilango Adigal, is the first Adikavi of Tamil literature. So, in these three languages of the south, the first poets were Jains. My vast study of several decades inspired me to write a comprehensive history of major Jaina works of greater significance in English. Jaina poets are not fanatics. I should make that very clear. They love their language, they love their religion, but they were never fanatics. And the Jaina poets have written on non Jaina subjects. For instance, Pampa, the first poet, and Ranna, who was his disciple, have written epics based on the Sanskrit Vyasabharatam, and have also authored Jina Puranas based on the Mahapurana of Jinsenacharya and Gudbhadracharya. Jaina poets have made it clear, they have made a clear distinction between the Laukika, this worldly, and the Agamika, dealing with the Jaina thing. A special feature of Laukika Kavya is its a hero, a Puranic character who is identified with the patron of the poet, usually a king. Pampa and Ranna have identified their patron kings with Arjuna and Bhima, respectively, in their Mahakavyas, Vikramarjuna Vijaya and Sahasa Bhima Vijaya. This goes to prove that Jaina poets moved with the spirit of the time. They accommodated non Jaina works also, and at the same time, without losing the importance of their religion and their religious works.
Yes. Thank you so much, sir, for elaborating on the contribution of the important poets, writers who have contributed to not just Kannada literature, but also the literature of the whole South India. And that was something that very few of us know, actually. With this, I would like to move ahead to the next question. Sir, you have written extensively on multiple topics, including art, architecture, archaeology, iconography, literature studies, and so on. But you have also written on women in Jainism. What drew you to this particular topic, and what insights did you get from your research? Because nowadays, feminist history and the gender history is a very important part, and you have already written about it, Jainism and women. So, how do you see this particular topic, sir?
Well, coming to the role of women, I have some points to explain. Because in the context of Karnataka, women have played a prominent role in protecting and promoting Jainism in all its aspects. They took lead in building Jina mandiras, giving endowments to the temples, and ahara dan to monks and nuns. Dana Chintamani Hattimabbe shines like a polar star. She built 1,501 temples and distributed 1,500 jinabimbas and small wooden mantapas of to the extent of 1,500. Kamalampana's book, my learned wife's book, Attimabbe and Chalukyas, written in English, it proffers a detailed history of Attimabbe's contribution to Jainism and to Karnataka as well. And Patamahishi Shantala Devi is another noble lady who built a temple on the crest of Chandragiri at Shravanabellagoda. She and her mother died by the right of Sallekana. Many inscriptions at Shravanabellagoda, Koppala, and many other places in Karnataka have recorded the contribution of Jaina women to the culture of Karnataka. Instances of Jaina women who ruled several parts of Karnataka are not lacking. Queen Abbaka and Mahamandaleshwari Channabaira Devi, they efficiently ruled parts of South Canara and had successfully defeated the Portuguese army. Queen Channabaira Devi ruled for a long period of 50 years and was known for exporting huge quantities of excellent quality of pepper, for which she was bestowed the title of Queen of Black Pepper by the
Yes.
Portuguese, for which she celebrated lady of that period, that is 16th, 17th century. The celebrated lady Ravidevi Ekka is responsible for protecting the Dhavala or the Shatkanda Agama by getting it recopied. My books, Women Rulers in Coastal Karnataka, one of the important books on the role of women, and another, Dhavala manuscripts of Jaina art. It also provides more information on the role of Jaina women in protecting to the posterity the tradition of Jains and how they contributed to the glory of Karnataka in various fields, commencing from art, architecture, and many other allied disciplines.
Absolutely, sir. Since we are talking about women, I have also read somewhere that there was an ancient university of the Jain nuns, or some kind of an educational center for the Jain nuns in the state of Tamil Nadu. Can you talk more about it? And the second question is also, sir, that you've written a book on Saraswati. I have just finished reading that particular book on Saraswati, a wonderful book, sir. Would you also elaborate on the role of Saraswati in Jainism? So these are the two questions from my side.
Since you referred to goddess of learning Saraswati, you know, in the context of Jaina tradition, uh, Saraswati is referred as Shruta Devi.
Shruta Devi. Yes, sir.
Shruta Devi, she who has protected the Jaina well tradition and the message of Jinas. Well, in South Canara in particular, there are about 180 temples only in South Canara. And every temple has the image of Shruta Devi, Saraswati,
Oh,
apart from the images and sculptures of 24 Tirthankaras. Invariably, every Jaina temple has the image of Shruta Devi, means it only reflects and suggests how Jains have given importance for learning. And another plus point of the Jaina tradition is throughout the history of Jainism, we find that they have encouraged women to study. And for that matter, it is the Tirthankara, Purushabadeva, who educated his two daughters, Brahmi and Sundari, and taught
Rami and
them the
Sundari.
Lipi, script, and the mathematics. Well, I have written a good number of books and research articles in Kannada and English. I do not claim that all of them are of equal importance. It is true, some of them are very popular. I am glad that 1 lakh copies of my book, Dravida Bhasha Vijnana, are sold. 1 lakh copies on Dravidian linguistics. I wrote it in Kannada for the first time. And so far, it has been a regular textbook for post-graduation classes in not less than 12 universities. Okay. I'm basically a research-oriented scholar, but majority of my books also deal with the Jaina theme. It does not mean I am non-creative writer. My two novels, lively essays, biographical writings, books for children, they all speak that I am also a creative writer. Crowning glory of such works is the Desi epic Charu Vasanta, to which you just referred to. It's an epic of 300 pages in blank verse. I wrote it in 1 month. It is the
Oh,
sto- yeah, it is the story of Charu Datta, one of the most popular characters in Jaina narrative literature. It has become the darling of readers and translators to the extent that so far it has been translated into Assamese, Banjara, Bengali, English, Gujarati, Hindi, Kashmiri, Malayalam, Marathi, Oriya, Persian, Punjabi, Prakrit, Rajasthan, Sanskrit, Telugu, and Urdu languages. What more should I ask in my life than this bonanza? The two other
absolutely.
works, the two other works that enjoy a special place in my books are Prakrita Katha Sahitya. It's a voluminous book written in Kannada, which has undergone several reprints. And the other book is Spectrum of Classical Literature in Karnataka, written in English. The spectrum is in 5 volumes and runs to 1,400 pages and was launched in London University in the presence of a number of international scholars from different countries. I have made an earnest attempt to present the body, spirit, and soul of Jaina classical poetry and Shastra Granthas. Readers of all faiths can taste and share the most perfect utterances of the ripest thought by the finest minds. This is my signature work that will live for centuries.
We are very much sure about it, sir. And that work will keep inspiring further generations for years to come. My next question to you, sir, catching with the earlier questions, is that how do you see the role of regional languages? Because a lot much of work of the ancient and medieval scholars has been in Kannada, Tamil, Telugu, Marathi, Gujarati, Odia, Bengali, and so many other places where Jainism has been disseminated. What work and what contribution do you see of these writers in preserving the philosophical richness, the historical traditions of the Jain tradition, the regional languages and their contributions?
Yeah, India has been a country of many religions. many languages, and many regional cultures. For thousands of years, it has been like that. In the beginning, many Prakrit dialects were popular in the north. Dravidian languages were popular in the south. But people were cordial. They did not quarrel well about languages. They, yeah, in the beginning of current era, Prakrit languages were popular, and after the Sanskrit Prashasti inscription of Shaka King Rudradaman at Junagadh,
Yes.
Sanskrit became the choice of the learned, and it spread with speed, but at the cost of Prakrit and regional languages. Regional languages and Prakrit were not encouraged on par with Sanskrit because the central government and the state governments, they always encouraged Sanskrit by offering scholarships and also awarding prizes and all that. And let me not extend on that on those lines. Well, during the colonial period, local languages were encouraged, luckily. The core of different philosophies had been distilled into regional language from the period of Mahavira and Buddha, who preached in the languages common people, taking clues from Buddha and Mahavira. The saints and scholars preached and wrote in the languages of the mass and kept the lamp burning. In particular, Jaina monks and men of letters, they continued to spread the message of Jinas and Jinavani became Janavani and Prajavani.
This point was extremely important, sir, that Jinavani became the language of Janavani, because I think
Thanks
that the
to
survival of Jainism has a lot to owe to these regional languages. So very wonderful point, sir, about that.
right,
Uh,
right.
My next question to you, sir, is that what do you believe are the most misunderstood or overlooked or less worked aspects of Jain studies in the contemporary scholarship? Like which aspect of Jainism is less studied? It has been ignored for a long period of time, and that needs more attention from the future scholars.
Yes. There are some areas of misunderstanding despite clarification from experts. I quote two instances. Many non Jains, including the learned and even including some Jains, believe that Jainism is Hinduism. They
Hmm.
argue, look at the temples, festivals, food and language, etc. And in brief, Jaina way of life and worship is similar to Hinduism. Unquote. Time and again, Jains have clarified the matter, explaining the area of differences. The fact is, Jains and others have all lived together for centuries, and naturally, similarities and mutual influence is common. We should not jump to the conclusion from outer appearances, but probe deep into the details. Jains have their own shastras, their own basic canons to follow, and they have own gods and goddesses to worship, and they have their own mantras to recite. So these are some responsibilities of all educated scholars and other writers that they should, whenever the demand is there, come forward boldly, clarify the points, and request the others um, who have misunderstood, clarify the point of debate and misunderstanding, and tell them no, our this is one of the oldest religion, living religion, not only restrict to that. Today also, till today, we have been following the principles. They were well taught thousands of years ago. That only proves how important are there. For the modern world in particular, it is more the way of life of Jains is more relevant today than it was earlier. So, like this, we have to convince the others and bring them to our fold.
I'm sure, sir, that everybody who watches this interview would take a note of this and they would try their best to do the needful. Before we move on to the last question, my question personally is that, sir, I'm personally very much interested in art, architecture, and iconography. And you have worked a lot on the art, architecture, iconography, and archaeology part of Jainism in Karnataka. What is the speciality? I would like you to elaborate on this particular aspect so that viewers who are watching us would also know a little bit about the specific characteristics of the architecture and art of Jainism in the region of Karnataka. Can you please elaborate on that, sir?
Yes. Some 20 years ago, I wrote a book, very important book on the topic on which you were asking the question, that is the morphology of Jaina architecture. In the morphology of Jaina architecture, because many are under the impression that Jaina art and architecture is very much similar to the non-Jaina one, and therefore the Jainas do not have an architectural type of their own, but I had to clarify them. And because of that reason, I wrote a book on the Jaina morphology where I have explained in detail that Jaina art and architecture has its own style, its own idiom, its own grammar. So do not come to the conclusion by looking at from the outside. Enter the temple, come inside. I will show you the Jinibimbas are different. Look at the Shasana Devatas, their details, their sculptural details, and the way that we worship them, the mantras that we have, and all that. And then look at that Shruta Devi also, how our Jaina Puranas have in detail explained the methodology of worshipping them. And if we probe more deep, we will come to know the difference. And each the way of doing Abhisheka is different from the Hindus' Abhisheka. And the Tirtha that is offered in the Hindu temple, they drink the Tirtha, whereas
Yeah.
in the Jaina temple, we do not do it because they sprinkle the Jinagandhodaka, the sacred water that comes out of worship, I mean, the illustration, Abhisheka. And these are the areas we have so many differences. And some of my texts and articles they have explained in detail, and scholars have really appreciated. Yes, Jaina architecture, they have of their own. It is different from the Hindu or type or and style of architecture. Yes.
Definitely, sir. Jain architecture and Jain art has a language of itself, and it actually conveys the philosophical connotations that Jainism stands for. And specifically in the region of Karnataka, there's a lot much of the architecture, the marvelous architectures of multiple dynastic
Yeah.
affiliations
Yes.
that have
Yes.
survived the test of time. And because Jainism is a living tradition, we can actually do a much more different aspect study of not just the architecture but also the rituals that you very well highlighted, that even in the rituals there's a difference between what the Jains do, and also there's a difference of the regional styles that we see in Karnataka, in Maharashtra, in Gujarat, and in so many other places. Today people just know that there's a universal architectural style known as Maru Gurjara style, but in ancient period and in medieval period, every region like
Right.
Karnataka had its own distinct style. So thank you so much, sir, for highlighting that particular point. My last question to you, sir, as a senior scholar, as our guide, and as a person who has done pioneering works in multiple aspects of Jain studies, what would your advice be for the future scholars? What would you suggest? Because in today's world, people are using a lot of artificial intelligence, computers, software skills, and so many things that people may or may not take their aspects seriously. What is your suggestion, sir, as a senior scholar to all of us?
My father used to tell me, always. Don't venture to teach or preach others. Advise others. We should not do it. But we have, being elders, some responsibility. For having lived so many years, well, we will have discovered some salient areas where the youngsters should also be taught. I would rather, without advising them, request them to enter into the portals of our Jaina temples, take out the manuscripts or the preserved texts there, and go through those texts, follow the principles. When you are convinced they are relevant to the modern life. So, and then also we have the responsibility of not just preserving the principles for ourselves, since they are important, we should impart them to others also. Because
Yes.
nowadays we see that Jains youngsters, they develop friendship with the non-Jains, and with them they go to places of worship and all that. Let them, but we should not give up our roots, our identity, our asmita. So, well, now I am in the evening of my life. Though memory and has deteriorated, health is not that bad. My health is good, enough to attend to basic requirements. I request, I request all of you who have listened to this particular item to bless me, huh? To lead a fruitful and meaningful life. Dukkha kavo, khamma kavo, bodhilavo, jinaguna sampatti hovu macham.
Wonderful, sir. That was a wonderful point to end this particular conversation. In fact, when you were speaking, it felt as if you should interact more. I should ask more questions and take more information out of you because the decades of works that you have done, especially in the times when there was less computer technology, especially when there were less transport facilities and all the other funding facilities that we have today. Earlier, it was not the case. In such circumstances, stalwarts like you have worked, and that is actually an inspiration for all of us. We are very much thankful to you, sir, for this particular time that you have spent with ancient Jainism. And I'm very hopeful that whoever listens to this particular conversation with Professor Emeritus, Professor Hampa Nagarjaiah, sir, very well justifies the title of Nadoja, a great teacher, and that will inspire each and every future scholar in the field of not just Jain studies, but overall the studies in heritage, history, culture of our ancient land of India. Thank you very much, sir, for engaging with us today. Jai Jinendra.
Jai Jinendra. Jai Jinendra. I enjoyed the program.
I enjoyed